say you're thinking about breaking your lease. Now, hopefully it's a good situation where you're expanding and growing, and oftentimes, that will end up in a win-win situation with the landlord because you need more space. But sometimes, and frequently, when you do think about breaking your lease, it's not such a pretty picture.
No.
Yet, with the right type of guidance, we can work through most of that.
Well, we can sure help a lot, and I tell you, it's a very serious issue. You have a lease obligation. You've made promises. The landlord makes promises. You're obviously not supposed to break a lease, but what happens if you just don't have any money? You're not making it. And I've given some talks before, and at first landlords are a little upset that I'm talking about breaking the lease, but then they end up liking everything I have to say. That mostly you got to communicate with the landlord. We got to negotiate something out. It's not that I want to leave the space. I have to leave the space. I got no money.
Right.
So in fact, their new term I heard fairly recently called jingle mail. Maybe it started in the residential business, but I talk to developers that own big shopping centers, and they say a couple times a week they just get the keys mailed to them.
Oh.
The tenant leaves in the middle of the night, says, I'm sorry, do what you have to do, I don't have any money. Well, that's what the landlord doesn't want to happen. It would be nice to call them or have me call them and say, look, we don't want to be in this position, but we are. We have cash flow problems, we can't meet our obligations. And then everything becomes a negotiation. How much can you pay? How can you pay me later? Can we make some of this into a note, or let's see how your business is doing. Is there anything I can do to help you do your business? Can we shrink you from the space you're in now to a smaller space, or do something different, or stay there month to month, and I'll try to find a tenant for that space, and when I do, then you agree to leave. So there's a lot of negotiations that can and should go on.
I hear you saying it's a lot about communication.
A lot about communication, and we need to talk to the landlord, and then also, if it really gets down to the battling stages, which no one likes to see, then you got to look at your lease and see what you negotiated out. Does your company have assets? Did you sign personally, or is it just the company that's on the lease? And if you're going bankrupt anyway, and check with your lawyer on this, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that if your assets are no good corporately, and that's all that's signed up, there's nothing the landlord can do. You're walking away, you're bankrupting the company anyway. So then you're just being polite and pleasant and trying to break it. Now, if you have signed the lease personally, well, do you have personal assets, or are you going to file bankruptcy or threaten to file bankruptcy? And you need to just have that discussion with the landlord too, because it could be your obligations are too much, and depending on the circumstances will affect on what kind of negotiations the landlord will do with you. And I was talking to someone just recently who had that situation, went to the landlord and said, I can't make it. And the landlord said, all right, how much can you pay? So they just instantly negotiated a lower rent, and the landlord tried to find a new tenant for the space, and did. And then now that new tenant isn't paying as much as the landlord, or excuse me, what the tenant was paying, so the tenant agreed to pay the difference. So it's infinite, the things you can do. But communicating, negotiating, hold your head up high as best you can, and try to work it out, and then
start early. As soon as you start to see, don't wait until you're ready to mail in the keys.
Right. Don't wait till you're completely out of money. If you see it happening in advance, maybe the landlord will negotiate something with you so the bleeding is minimized. Maybe there's things that can be turned around. Maybe you need better signage, or a different location that the landlord has, or you move into another of the landlord's buildings, or I guess what I'm saying is you just need to communicate with your tenant rep, come up with some ideas, talk to the landlord, and sometimes the landlord won't have any choice. You tell them, hey, guess what, I'm out of here, I got no assets, nothing you can do. Other times there's a negotiable event there.
Could be a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to learn more about facility, site selection, lease negotiation, etc., go to the website below. There we have 20 videos which will tell you probably more than you ever want to know about site selection and lease negotiation. Thanks a lot.